Hello and welcome back to another video today here again on Forza Horizon 5 to take a look at another of the cars from the most recent Hot Wheels expansion, which is this Mosler MT900 GT3 car, which is potentially the final actually interesting car from this expansion, having taken a look at the Hennessy, the Chopin, the Brabham and a few of the made-up Hot Wheels cars already. And as the name would suggest, this is of course a GT3 variant of the Mosler. It's from 2006, making it 4 years older than the non-GT3 car we already have in the game, the MT900S. This actually has 10 less horsepower than that car, with 520, despite them both having the same 7-litre LS engine, which is the same engine found in the Corvette of the time, among other things. It's actually an evolution of the MT900R, which is, as the R would suggest, the racing variant of the Mosler, although that car had a much smaller 5.7-litre engine, this one having the 7-litre and being homologated for GT3 racing, of course. And it weighs 150 kilos more than the road-going car we have in the game, at 1,275 kilos. Being a GT3 car, it handles amazingly well, with not even a suggestion that the back would ever step out, even if you really pushed it to. This also means, it being a racing car, that the top speed isn't all that huge at 189 miles an hour on the downhill of the motorway, relatively speaking of course, because that is still pretty quick. Apparently the MT900 range of cars was brought in to replace the Mosler Raptor, which is this thing up on screen somewhere here, that I'd actually never heard of before making this video. I was only really aware of this Mosler, which was originally sold as a Consulia GTP in 1985, that's when it came out, and was later renamed to the Mosler Intruder, and then finally Mosler Raptor, so Ford stole that name from Mosler, before it was replaced with the Moslers that we know today, that kind of look like this thing. In terms of upgrades, there are several engine swaps, a V10, 2 V12s and a racing V8. Is your usual all-wheel drive swap. It is already on slick tyres, but you can put semi-slicks on if you want to make it worse, although potentially these have more grip than standard slicks. Generally in Forza, if you see tyre writing on it like that, it's even grippier than slicks, which might explain why this handled quite so well. You can of course also increase your tyre widths and bring your track width out a bit if you want to. It already has a racing transmission, as you might expect, and a racing diff, although it doesn't have a race driveline, so that is still an option if you want to lose a little bit of weight. It's surprisingly not equipped with race brakes from standard, but is of course equipped with race suspension, although you can add off-road or drift suspension instead if you want to ruin it. And surprisingly, there is weight reduction available in this section, as well as a few engine upgrades if you want to add in a little bit more power. I absolutely hate S2 class, so I tried to build it to S1 for Horizon Open Racing. By equipping semi-slicks, I was able to drop it well into S1 class, where I then had enough PI to increase the tyre width and track width, as well as squeezing in a race driveline and race ignition, giving the car 531 horsepower, but also bringing the weight up to 1,284 kilos, unfortunately. I also painted it in Spectra Flame Green, which I think looks absolutely incredible on this car, especially with those gold wheel centres. The first race I got into was this one that you're seeing at the moment around the Plaza circuit, where I fell to the back to begin with, being rear-wheel drive, then settled into third place, where it was clear I was slower than the cars in front, but similar pace to the car behind, meaning I stayed where I was and finished the race in third. Secondly, it was the Reservorio sprint, where I fell to the back again in that high-speed section, apart from the two cars that did front flips somehow, who were of course behind me by the time we got to the corner. I then caught up to everyone in the twisty bits for a while, struggled to pass a Porsche, until I put myself in a wall, eventually pushing it a little bit too hard, where after that I didn't really push it enough, and finished pretty terribly, to be honest. Finally, we moved on to the Horizon Mexico circuit, which was probably my best driving in this adventure somehow, but I still finished in a terrible place, although I did take third overall, rather surprisingly. Not really sure how I managed that. Despite saying a minute ago that I hated S2 class, I did then go and build an S2 class car for some more Horizon Open Racing, as that S1 build was pretty awful, to be honest. mostly because I didn't put enough power in it, probably because the PI was so high from standard. Dropping PI on a car always makes it difficult to build, I think. Although I did realise whilst building this car that I could have reduced the PI further on that S1 car by making it all-wheel drive, and therefore it would have been able to get up to at least 584 horsepower. But never mind, let's carry on with the S2 class car that we've got here, which I had to equip with a different engine to get it to the top of S2, so to keep vaguely near the correct engine, I put in the Racing V8 and fully upgraded that engine, although I couldn't equip the twin turbos within the PI. This car will easily get into X-Class, by the way, with a few upgrades. Anyway, after balancing the PI for a while, including using some heavier wheels to drop it down slightly, I did get it to balance to the top of S2 at 998, now producing 1,042 horsepower and weighing 1,252 kilos. I also finished it off with a nice Spectraflame purple to maximise these performance gains. I joined mid-adventure. The first race you're seeing here was the Vulcan Sprint, which was actually the middle race of the series, the second race. I thought it would be too handling biased for this car's power, especially after I nearly spun it at the start of this race. However, the power meant on the straights I could clear everyone, but by the time I did, first place had completely vanished into the distance. I was, however, very pleased with that second place finish. The adventure finished with the Estadio circuit, which is a track I do absolutely love in the first place. I did lose a few places off the line, but was leading again by the time Ghosting had finished, and won by a huge margin, getting fastest lap by over 2 seconds, giving me third overall in that adventure, despite only taking part in 2 races. As those first 2 races were only a partial adventure, I did also do a second full adventure, starting with the Arch of Moulaget circuit, which in open for some reason is only a 2-lap event. But it was a similar story. I lost out a bit off the line, but was winning by the end of the first lap, going on to win the race and getting fastest lap by over 2 seconds again. The second race, around the Horizon Mexico circuit, took a bit longer for me to get out in front, but somehow I eventually still took the win and fastest lap again by quite a margin. Finally, it was the Desansar Sprint, where I really messed up the start and the first few corners. I did get that really low speed corner pretty good, and then did eventually catch up to the other cars, 2 being in front of me, but the other Mosler decided he didn't want to let me past, and pushed me out wide into the final corner, making me finish third in that race in the end, although I potentially wouldn't have overtaken those 2 cars anyway. But yeah, I was slightly frustrated that he had pushed me out like that. I did, however, with those results in those 3 races, win the adventure as an overall, somehow. So there we go, that is going to do it for a first look at the Mosler GT3 car here on Forza Horizon 5, which I think is probably the final interesting car from the Hot Wheels expansion. So stock, it drives fantastically, of course it does, because it's a GT3 car. In S1, I don't think it's going to be great, although potentially a tune with more power than the one I made would be a bit better at least. In S2 though, this thing was incredible. Probably my favourite S2 class car I've got actually, so if for whatever reason I do any more S2 class racing, I will probably use this. As ever though, do let me know if there's any other cars from the Hot Wheels expansion you'd like me to take a look at. I know there are a few more that I'm not necessarily as excited about, but I would still love to make videos on them if that would be something you guys would be interested in. So do let me know which ones specifically you would potentially like to see. That though is going to be all for today's video, taking a first look at this Mosler GT3 car. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back with the next video very soon.